India has suspended new visas for Canadians and asked Ottawa to reduce its diplomatic presence in the country, sharply escalating a spat triggered by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's accusations linking New Delhi to a Sikh separatist Hardeep Singh Nijjar's murder. India is the country that has the most number of foreign students in Canada because of their favourable immigration policy that aims to welcome 500,000 new permanent residents by the year 2050. Now, if relations happen to worsen, then what is the solution as the lives of students is put in danger? Should they start looking for alternatives, or is there some other solution? Let's discuss. Joining us at this point, Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goel, former diplomat. We also have Dr. Jayjeet Bhattacharya, President, Centre for Digital Economic Policy Research, joining us live. Adit Kothari, International Affairs expert, is live with us. Captain Alok Bansal, Foreign Affairs expert, also joins us live. Sharat Kohli, Senior Economist, also is joining the broadcast. Let me make a start with you, Ambassador Goel, on what you believe the impact of this current crisis will be on people-to-people ties between the two nations.
Uday, not issuing the visas or putting a hold on the issue of visas till whenever, there are obvious economic implications. There will be so many business people who will be traveling to, or who may not have the visa at the moment, but who will be wanting to travel to India for business discussions. There will be tourists who will be coming to India, etc. And all that is now in large, really. Therefore, there are clear economic implications, and I'm not going to talk in detail about the economic implications of not issuing visas. I noticed that there are two economists here on the panel. They will take care of it. But you asked me about the people-to-people level ties, and let me focus on those things really. Besides just the diaspora, besides the Indian community, whose relations here, Indian citizens here, whose relations or whose friends in Canada would be wanting to travel to meet with them, and they may need visas, etc. Besides those people, there will be a great disruption in the people-to-people level interaction, and I think there will be a reputational. In the last program, you used the word reputational loss. Our not issuing visas to those Canadians who want to travel to India for whatever purpose, economic, meeting with the relatives and friends, tourism, whatever it is, our not issuing visas to them actually will cause us more damage, reputational damage, than anything else. I really don't see what we are going to be gaining by refusing to issue visas. In any case, those who have done this work before, they will know that all precautions are taken to ensure that the undesirable quote-unquote elements are not allowed into the country. In fact, there are many desirable elements who also are not able to get into the country because of this kind of restrictions. I remember last time when there was a meeting of the Indian diaspora, a PIO meeting here in India. There was one Canadian gentleman who was not able to get into, even though he wanted to meet with the Prime Minister. Anyway, so those things happen. And it also happens that despite all precautions, elements who should not be able to come in, they do. Kanishka, they boarded the flight. Even though in that case, it can be said that Canadian government was not careful enough. But when they boarded the flight, after the visa was issued from here, we could have checked on those things. But the fact is, I can see Alok nodding his head very vigorously. That's okay. So the point is that elements do get in, even after all the checks. But by not issuing the visa, we are actually causing much more unhappiness and discomfort and inconvenience than actually would gain us anything at all in the process.
Why don't I get Captain Alok Bansal to quickly react to your statement, since he wanted to come in. Yes, Captain Alok.
I just wanted to say that it's important to give a signal to Canada. Canadian behavior in the recent past has been extremely disturbing. The statement which Prime Minister made on the floor of the House was extremely damaging. And if we look back, since the Ambassador was talking about Kanishka was a case which was actually a clear-cut case of Canadian neglect And actually, thereafter, even after, although it was the biggest aviation accident in the world before 9/11, I think, and the biggest mass murder in Canadian history, Canadian government did nothing. In fact, the perpetrators virtually got scot-free. Only one man was convicted and he's also free today. 300 plus people killed. I think you see the acts. The Canadians were looking at those people who were suspicious, they ignored it. So there is a deep danger. In fact, there is a book which has just come out, Cold Terror. Please read it. It actually shows how Canada is emerging as a hub of terrorists of all shades and hue. And see how Canada has dealt with the murder of Brar and how it dealt with Karima Baloch's murder. Karima Baloch died in 2020. Nothing was done. The people kept demanding, the family kept demanding that there is suspicion, ISI's involvement is suspected. Nothing happened. That lady died unsung, unheard in Canada. In Lake Ontario, her body was found. In fact, the police kept refusing to even start investigation. And now here in Mr. Brar's case, who was a terrorist by all admissions, he had been making statements which were extremely provocative, asking people to kill Indian politicians, making statements. Now, if that chap has been killed by somebody, and we see the gang wars that are taking place in Canada, Canada has really become a big bad world where you have mafiosi fighting each other. I think in that sort of a situation, we need to give a clear signal to Canada that this sort of a nonsense is not going to be accepted. And that's what I think Government of India said. We are not really worried about your visitors, few visitors here and there. We are shutting down visas till the security of our diplomats is ensured. And I think that is the signal which we wanted to give and we have given it.
Yes. Let me though follow that up by also asking you, Captain Alok Bansal, now for your entire take on the impact of this on our students there as well and professionals.
See, students, firstly, I have a serious issue with Indian students trying to go to these countries. I think Canada doesn't have Oxford, Cambridge or Harvard. I think why do they go to Canada? Has its own dynamics, its own reasons. And some of them may be affected at this juncture because if the tensions further aggravate, we will see Indian students not going to Canada. And that will be a serious economic blow to Canada because please understand the largest number of foreign students going to Canadian institutions are from India. Canada is a sparsely populated country. It needs immigration. It needs well-read, educated manpower to immigrate. And that's why Canada has been encouraging immigration. And if Indians actually stop going, it will be a big blow, whether we like it or not. It will be a blow. And that's one of the reasons I think while Trudeau's appeals have not really elicited that sort of a response from the other countries of the Anglo-Saxon world. Five Eyes members.
Just very brief one sentence.
Yes, yes.
Very briefly, first of all, Alok, it is not quite correct to say that Canada does not have institutions which compare with Oxford, Cambridge, etc., etc. My son has studied in Montreal, in McGill, and one can vouch for the excellence of at least that institution, number one. Number two, we diplomats, we also have been taught our success lies in making friends of the enemies and not enemies of the friends. This decision not to issue visa is turning friends into the enemies. I'm not saying a signal doesn't need to be given. By all means, a signal has to be given, isolate the government, do whatever you want. Reduce trade if you have to, but don't turn your friends into enemies. And I'm talking about the common people here, not the government. Thank you.
Okay, let me take that across to Dr. Jaijit Bhattacharya as well. Now, Dr. Jaijit, come in here on, on which way this row is headed according to you. Do you see things getting better or do you see things spiraling, downwards between India and Canada?
So, I focus on technology and trade, so I'll have that lens when I give you my response.
Yes, because obviously it's having its impact on, the trade already with that trade deal being called off.
Absolutely. This is a conflict situation, right? It may not be the traditional conflict, but it's a conflict situation. In a conflict situation, when you retaliate, you obviously also harm yourself. So when you fire a missile, you're burning 2 to 3 crores on that missile. So you have to take a call whether you want to take that hit or not. So when it's a non-kinetic conflict, like the one we are seeing with Canada, obviously any action that India takes, any signaling that India does, will obviously have a negative impact on India, and that's a political call we have to take. If we want to walk away from every single conflict, then we become at an international or a global level, we become a purely Gandhian nation, which obviously even Mahatma Gandhi did not opt for when World War I and World War II happened. He actively pushed India into those wars. So there is a hit that we take. We have to decide how much of a hit we want to take. The trade between Canada is about 0.5% of the total trade that India has. Not something to be ignored upon, but it's also not something very, very significant. As one of the panelists mentioned, Canada is a large country with a population roughly little more than the population of NCR region in India. So, the population of Delhi being in half a continent, you can imagine the amount of wealth one has in terms of being able to just mine the land and do nothing. And therefore, their lifestyle that Canada offers is pretty similar to the Scandinavian lifestyle. The work pressure is much lower, the competition is much lower, and much more can be offered to its citizens because it's coming from mining and essentially using the land. That also, we must keep in mind that the erstwhile Canada had actually helped India significantly in our nuclear, technology, and I think we are, grateful for that. However, the nation seems to have changed. They seem to be siding with Canadian terrorists. Now I'm calling them Canadian because they really don't have much to do with Sikhism. They're Canadian citizens, acknowledged by the Prime Minister as Canadian, and they have been indulging in terrorist activities. So these are Canadian terrorists, pretty similar to the Taliban's being Pakistani terrorists. And if the Pakistani government is supporting Pakistani terrorists in the form of Taliban, an Indian government responds to it, it is precisely the same situation. I also truly believe that at some point in time, it will come back to bite Canada the same way it's coming back to bite Pakistan. And I think that is something more worrisome because we would like to have a strong Canada. We would like to have a prosperous Canada so that we can trade, there is global peace. But if Canada is shooting itself in its foot because it's siding with elements which are harmful for global peace, then that's something quite worrisome. It's going to harm trade, not just with India, but with many other nations. It's also going to harm technology per se, although the Canadian IT market is less than 1/10 of the US market. But the flow of technology gets hit when there is insecurity in a nation. So people who've got the skills will move away from Canada. Clearly they have some good universities, better than what India has. But even students will walk away because security is more important than education. And therefore, they will be opting for, let's say, the Australian universities and so on and so forth. So Canada will surely get hit. In the process, our students will also get hit. It's a political call in terms of how much we want to take as a hit. Our trade will also get hit to an extent. It's again a political call, same as when we go for war. Every bullet that is fired, we are losing money, but we need to fire that bullet. We can't just walk away. And these are political decisions in terms of impact on trade and technology. There will be an impact. But I think India has become and going down the path of becoming extremely large in both the areas of trade and in terms of acquiring technology. So I believe in terms of its impact on India, it will not be as significant as it might have been 20 years back.
Okay, let me quickly, in fact, take that across to Adit Kothari as well. Adit Kothari, your interpretation of how much of an impact, to what extent this current crisis will have on our diaspora there, on the students, on professionals as well, who aspire to get those PR cards that China often offers, a bit more easier than other countries, which is why people make a beeline for Canada.
That's correct. I mean, Canada is definitely one of those easier countries to immigrate to, and which is why it had become one of those destinations where typically the Indian diaspora has done very well. They've done successfully well in both education and post-education spheres of life as well. 97% of people of Indian origin who essentially apply for residency do end up getting them, as compared to, if I was to look at US, only 23% of people essentially end up getting those permanent residencies. So definitely, there is that impact which is going to be causing a bit of a mayhem and a bit of a stress to that particular population and to the diaspora. But on the whole, Udayji, there has to be an expiry date to the political correctness. How long can a country withstand this sort of political correctness where, countries like United States or Canada or even United Kingdom, where I am from, or where I live, harbor people essentially playing India's politics in their domain in the garb of human rights, and allow them a free run to go and vandalize institutions, to create civil unrest, to essentially even have posters eulogizing murders of your government staff, of the Indian government staff. So the security apparatus in all of these countries, including United Kingdom, have essentially failed to tackle these particular issues. And I'm going to go back to this particular report, which was filed for the British government not very long ago, only a couple of months ago. It's called the Prevent Report, which is filed by a gentleman called William Shawcroft, and he essentially mentioned that the pro-Khalistani elements in Britain, although they are small in number, they have become extremely violent, and the eminent result is the civil society is being affected by the kind of vandalism and the feral nature of their protests. So that has to be called out, and I'm glad that this government is taking a stand. With regards to what Ambassador Goel has said, of course, from a diplomatic perspective, he's absolutely right that, you would rather be friendly with all countries rather than make enemies. But at the end of the day, the way this particular Canadian government is working, it's overt, and it's extremely clear that, they are, overtly being extremely feral and vicious. So in my opinion, I don't think the government had much of a choice. The visa cancellation norm, I think it comes in a good shape and form. Udayji.
Sharat Kohli, what is likely to be the economic impact, the economic cost of this entire crisis and the decisions taken?
Well, if I speak on the conclusion before I explain, I would say that Canada needs India far more than India needs Canada. I think that's, if I were to conclude my statement, but I couldn't stop myself from saying at the beginning itself. $8 billion, Uday, is the total trade being done, roughly a little bit here and there. And fortunately, it's 50-50. So about $4 billion of import, about $4 billion of import, broadly speaking. I'm rounding off the numbers. So for India, with total foreign exports, or total exports of $750 billion, I think for India, it really doesn't matter. And if you look at the list of items being imported and exported, I thought the items being exported from India are more significant and are more imperative to Canada than what we are importing from Canada, for that matter. Of course, let's leave out the earlier nuclear assistance that one of the panelists spoke about. But that's not the situation today. So I think the impact, the population of Canada, as Dr. Jayjeet said, it's about below 4 crores, 3 crore 85 lakhs. That's, as he rightly said, if we include the NCR areas, you'll probably cover that population. So it really, really doesn't matter. I mean, Canada would be a bigger loser. And let me make a very, very bold statement that all the success stories in Canada, I don't talk of Tim Hortons and others, but most of the success stories in Canada of businessmen are Indians, because they are there in the largest number. The students are there in the largest number from India. So most of the success stories, they emanate from India. And what that turns out to be that Canada is essentially being run and controlled directly or indirectly by Indians. So who stands to lose? I mean, the answer is very, very clear. But I'm very, very impressed with something, Uday. I think Ambassador Goel would agree with me that I'm highly impressed by this new, bold India. Well, when we had this kind of a tip with a developed nation earlier, the situation was, sir, jo aap kahe wo hoga, jaise aap kahe wo hoga, we were on the receiving end. This is the new India, Uday, which I'm very happy about, that we'll give you 1 for 1. We'll give you 2 for 1, for that matter. You do something on us and you be prepared to get 1 from us. So I think that is what I love about this whole thing. It's a very, very unfortunate thing. Having said that, I would like to add Very unfortunate thing, because there are millions of students. I was talking to a businessman in Toronto last night, and incidentally, he has sent his children to India. So this was a case of a reverse admission. His children study in Delhi University. He's based out of Toronto. Then coincidentally, I met another family whose two children, they study in Ontario. So I met both the families, and what was common in both the families was they were both worried about the future of their children. They were worried about traveling to Canada and India both ways, both the families. So I think it's a very unfortunate thing, and I'm really surprised at Mr. Trudeau's political compulsions. He's of course, that 158 plus 24, the Liberal, the National Democratic Party or whatever it is called, Jagmeet Singh, he's supporting it. So basically a minority government. He wants to hold his chair. But then in the process of holding chair, look at the cost, look at the loss of reputation, look at the inconvenience you're causing to the people around your country and in India. I only hope, wish and pray that this doesn't escalate, and somewhere down the line a solution is found where Mr. Trudeau and his government has to accept the fact that he's actually harboring separatists in his country, and he has to understand take a reverse situation with that. What if somebody wanted to take a piece out of Canada and India was harboring it? How would Mr. Trudeau would have reacted? I mean, a very easy way to understand, just put yourself in my shoes, or vice versa. So I think this is what Mr. Trudeau needs to understand. But his political compulsions, as of now, I mean, he doesn't want his government to fall. So although his approval rating has gone down to 30%, his main opponent rating is now 41%. His own rating has gone down to 30%. So at any cost, he wants to save his chair. But from a trade perspective, coming back to your question, Uday, to wrap it up, that from a trade perspective, it will impact, but the impact will be very, very minimal, because Canada is not amongst the top listed trading partners of India, Uday.
Okay, let me start getting last words and closing comments. Ambassador Goel.
Uday, very quickly, just responding to what Adit said, I'm not saying that we should be afraid of making enemies, but don't have to turn friends into enemies for no reason. Okay. So government, yes. People, no. People are our ultimate asset. Okay, number one. Number two, I don't think India was ever in a position where they said, "My baap, aap आओ और मेरी ले लो." नहीं करते थे हम जी. तब भी हम थे. But our economic strength, we began to become economically stronger in 1990s, after we had become so bankrupt that we didn't even have 70 days foreign currency to import. After we gathered our economic strength, we have found our teeth. But we are still not completely not on the top, really. Therefore, while we continue to be assertive, we maintain our dignity. It's very, very important that we also continue to really build up our economic strength either way. That's all I would say. Thank you.
Right. Let me also get in Captain Bansal for his closing comment. Yes, Captain Bansal.
There is no doubt that India wants good relations with all the countries of the world. But the countries of the world have to be cognizant of India's interests and India's concerns. Decades after what happened in Kanishka, India would not allow another threat to grow and emanate from foreign soils. So we would ideally like to nip it in the bud before a country actually nurtures and creates Frankenstein's monsters which affect India. And I think Indian government has made it very clear, showed it to the world, that we are not willing to be cowed down. So if anybody who is inimical or dangerous to India, either the country where he's staying takes action against him, or we will do something what we can do. And if the country blames us or accuses us of acts which we are not responsible for, we would do what we deem appropriate to ensure that our interests are protected.
Which is why it's unlikely that there will be any stance change by India, Sharad, but there has already been a climb down from Canada.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that is also very unfortunate that they are trying to clamp down. And I can only tell you something before I close, is that they will end up being losers. As I said, I like reiterate what I said. If you weigh out the losses between India and Canada, Canada's losses are far far more than India. So what they're probably taking a shot at their own foot. This is going to be a suicidal kind of a move, and I don't think it has any rationale behind it today.
Yes, sir. Adit Kothari, which way is this crisis headed according to you? In the next few days, do you believe there will be changes of stance? Do you believe there could be more statements from allies of Canada, or is that unlikely?
I think that is pretty much unlikely. I think the Five Eyes are typically going to be in support, rather not even support, but tacitly supporting what Canada is doing at the moment. But ultimately, for the Five Eyes allies, India is quite an important stakeholder in the grand scheme of things, especially in South Asian politics, where India is essentially going to be mitigating a lot of the risks that the Chinese are essentially posing. It's a catch-22 situation for the Five Eyes allies, where they wouldn't know how to go about it. So we can see a lot of contradictory statements coming even from the United States at this point. Jack Sullivan is saying something else, and then you have another office coming out with another sort of a comment. However, where this goes from here is the onus completely lies with Canada. Canada has to diffuse the situation by either producing something concrete in terms of evidence, or saying that they are willing to work with the Indian counterparts and the Indian officials and the Indian diplomats to diffuse the situation and bring the relations back to some sort of sense of normality. The onus is completely on Justin Trudeau at this point. The ball is in his court. Udayji.
Okay, I leave the closing comment to Dr. Jayajit before I take a break.
The situation reminds me of the song "We Didn't Start the Fire." We had a situation where 3,000 people were murdered in Bhopal, and we escorted the murderer safely out of the country. Arms were dropped in Purulia, and we allowed that person to escape. That should not get repeated. And I will therefore, repeat what Dr. Kohli is saying. We are really proud of the way the government has reacted. There's an affront to India. If Justin Trudeau was so keen to find out who killed the terrorist Nijjar, then he should have reached out to government of India on a confidential basis. He can't start that conversation in the Parliament of Canada and put himself in a corner to begin with. If he has decided to put himself in the corner, then obviously he'll get punched accordingly. So there is no escaping from it. We didn't create the situation. India did not create that situation. It was a creation of one person, not even Canada. Canadians are a very friendly set of people. It was a creation of their Prime Minister. And, India has to respond, and there was no other way to respond except the way that the government has responded. And I think every one of us should be proud of the way the government has responded.
All right, let's take a short break. We're back on the other side with lots more. Don't go anywhere. My thanks to our guests for joining us.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.